rock and come in. Baby, oh, baby, me say rock and come in.
Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Whitney and I'm here to provide you with natural hair content. So today I'm just going to be going over porosity while I'm doing my natural hair routine, and basically I'm just going to go through the characteristics, different ways that you can figure out what your porosity is, because it is one of the most important characteristics that we need to look at when we are trying to maintain the health of our hair. So if you want to see more, or if you're not sure what your porosity is, stay tuned. So I'm going to be using the Avocado Moisturizing Hair Milk by Mielle, as well as my Eco Styler Argan Oil Gel, just to do a quick wash and go, and basically, like I said, talk about porosity. So porosity in basic terms is your hair's ability to retain moisture. And there are different levels of porosity, as I said in my previous video, like a medium to high porosity, and then you have low as well as just high. So if we look at the hair strand, it is 3 different layers. Some people might only have 2 layers, but for the most part, people that have curly hair to coily hair will have about 3 layers. So you have the medulla, which is the most inner layer and it's the softest. And then you have your cortex, which is the second layer of your hair, and it's the thickest layer of your hair strand. So the cortex is basically the layer of hair where all nutrients penetrate so that you're able to maintain the health of your hair. So that also means that your pigmentation, so the color of your hair, comes from there, and that is where you will find the most protein in your hair strands. And then you have the cuticle. So the cuticle is basically made up of multiple layers of cuticles that overlap each other. So if you want, you can kind of think of it as like shingles on a roof. And depending on how elevated the cuticle is how high your porosity is. So if somebody has cuticles that are just completely, or I shouldn't say completely, but close together, that would mean that you probably have low porosity hair. If you have cuticles that are not completely closed but not completely lifted, that means that you would have normal to medium porosity. And if you have cuticles that are completely lifted, then you have high porosity. So there are different characteristics for each level of porosity, and I will go through them by category. So if we start off with low porosity, that is one of the hardest porosities to manage because it takes a lot for you to have your cuticles lifted, which means that products and water don't absorb into your hair very quickly. So using warm or hot water will help to lift those cuticles. However, once you have the product and the moisture in your cuticles and the cuticles are closed, it's a lot harder for the moisture to come out. So normally people who have lower porosity hair will have to stand underwater for a really long time to make sure it becomes fully saturated. And also you'll see that when you're putting hair products in, they kind of sit on top. If you look at mine, because I am a medium to high porosity, it kind of just saturates the hair strands very easily. So if you look at somebody who has medium to normal porosity, that means that they're basically in between high and low, and they don't have so much difficulty maintaining moisture. One thing I forgot to mention about low porosity is that it takes a long time for their hair to dry. So we're talking maybe days at a time before your hair is completely dried. Whereas medium porosity will only take a few hours or so for it to dry, maybe a day, nothing too crazy. Also, medium porosity hair takes well to color as well as styling, and usually you're able to maintain those styles for longer periods of time. And then if we talk about high porosity, well, high porosity is, you can say, a bit of a hassle in a sense, because as easily as moisture is retained, moisture leaves the hair strand since the cuticles are completely elevated, right? High porosity is also prone to dryness as well as breakage, and gets very wet easily. So your hair will become very saturated very quickly if you're standing underwater, or even if you're applying products, the products will usually saturate into your hair pretty easily. One other thing about porosity, or I should say high porosity more so, high porosity can be genetics or it could be caused from damage. So let's say for instance you're somebody who's low porosity and you decided to perm your hair. Well, your cuticles are most probably going to be elevated since there's proteins missing in the cuticles, or I should say the hair strand. So there's those gaps, and that is where the high porosity would come from. Damage can also be from dyes, bleaching, heat damage. So if you're using straighteners or curling wands to style your hair, that can be a factor into why you may have high porosity hair. Also, if you're taking really hot showers, which I tend to do, that can cause high porosity hair. I know that at one point on the right side of my head in the back I had a lot of frizz, and that was because I would just let the hot water run on my hair, so that causes high porosity. So if you think you know what your porosity is by now, comment down below based on the characteristics that I've explained for each level of porosity. If you're still not sure, there are different tests that you can use to basically determine what your porosity is. I would say there's 3 tests that you can try out, and one of them would be the Strand test. So the Strand test is basically when you just take a piece of your hair in your hand. You don't have to pull your hair out or anything, just literally take a piece of hair after it's been washed, and what you would do is you would just take that one piece of strand and you would run your fingers up and down the length of your hair. So if it's completely smooth, that would mean that you have low porosity hair. If you are feeling a few bumps, but for the most part it might be smooth, that would mean you have medium to normal porosity hair. And if, well, you're feeling bumps throughout the length of your hair, that usually means you have high porosity hair. Then you have the cup test. So once again, you want to make sure that your hair has been completely washed, and if you can try using shedded hair, that'd be best for the cup test. So the cup test, you basically take a cup with water in it and you put your strand of hair into the water and leave it there for about 5 to 10 minutes. When you come back, if your hair is floating, that means that you have low porosity hair. If your hair, when I say floating, I mean on top of the water. If your hair is floating like in the middle, that would mean that you have medium to normal porosity, and if it's sunk all the way to the bottom of the cup, that would mean you have high porosity. So the only thing that I would say about this test is that me personally, when I tried it, I left my hair in the water for about 15 minutes, and when I came back it was kind of floating in the middle of the cup, but I left it there longer, and then when I came back it was completely at the bottom. So that's one thing also that you have to take into consideration. Maybe depending on how long you leave it in there, it might end up at the bottom, or it might float, or once again might be on top. One other thing is that you can have different levels of porosity throughout your whole head. So let's say for instance you might have more damage, or you might have heat damage on the ends of your hair because you decided, okay, I'm no longer going to straighten my hair anymore, and you have new growth. Well, that would be 2 different porosities in one single hair strand. Also, if you decide to dye your hair, and let's say for instance one side you decide you're gonna dye it, I don't know, blonde, but you actually have really dark hair, and you decide to dye that piece blonde, well, that piece is going to be more high in porosity, or I should say more porous than the other hair strands on your head. So that's basically it for the water test. Now, if you wanted to try, sorry, for the cup test, if you wanted to try the water test, that would basically mean that when you're taking your shower, while you are letting the water run on your hair, like if you're gonna say, for instance, it's your wash day, you just let the water run on your hair, and depending on how quickly your hair saturates with water will determine your porosity. So if, let's say, for instance, you're in the shower and you're kind of just letting the water run on your hair and it's taking a really long time for it to like completely saturate, that would mean you have low porosity. If your hair saturates pretty quickly but it does take a little bit of time, that might mean you have medium porosity. And if your hair saturates very easily, then you most likely have high porosity hair. So one thing that you want to make sure that you keep in mind is that depending on the density of your hair, so how thick your hair is, it can take a little bit longer for your hair to become fully saturated. So with all those tests that I've mentioned, try them out. If you're still not sure what your porosity is, it's possible that you're a mix between two different porosities. It is normal that you have certain characteristics of, let's say, low porosity as well as high porosity. And with time of you taking care of your hair and testing out products, you'll eventually start to know what type of porosity is. So being natural is a journey. You do have to really learn your hair, learn what products your hair likes, what products your hair doesn't like, what techniques work for you, what styles work for you. Not everybody can, use wash and goes. Some people prefer to use twist outs or braid outs because maybe you get better definition, maybe the moisture is held longer when you're doing those type of styles. So it's really just about patience as well as trial and error when you're on a natural hair journey. Or if, let's say, for instance, you decide, okay, you want to transition, you no longer want to put chemicals in your hair, or you no longer want to put heat to your hair. Or let's say, for instance, you just big chopped, meaning you cut off all your hair for whatever reason. That is a whole journey on you learning your hair. Alright, y'all, so that's pretty much it when it comes to porosity. I'm just gonna finish applying the gel in my hair. I just finished applying the milk in all 4 sections, which I'm kind of leaving as a leave-in conditioner, and now I'm just going to apply the gel. So I'll be back once I'm done. Alright, y'all, so all the product as well, the gel has been applied, and I'm just going to let it probably air dry as well as diffuse. So I'll probably let it air dry for about 2 to 3 hours and then diffuse. It is kind of late, so I'll probably come back in the morning to let you see the results. And yeah, so if you've gotten this far, you should subscribe. It is free. And also, like I said, comment below what you think your hair porosity is, or if you know what it is. Also, let me know other topics that you would like me to cover regarding natural hair. I can definitely take a look into recording those type of things. And yeah. Alright, y'all, so it is the next day, and these are my results for my wash and go. Comment down below what you think, as well as what your hair porosity is if you haven't already. If you're unsure still what your hair porosity is, like I said, it can take some time before you're able to figure it out. You just need to have patience. So hair porosity is one of the most important hair characteristics to look at when you're trying to maintain the health of your hair. Apart from your hair type, meaning your hair curl pattern, this is something that we should really be looking at to know what techniques to use, know what maybe products we should use. It also depends on the density. So I will be talking about hair typing as well as density and some other characteristics in my next video. If you would like to see that, stay tuned, and I'll see you then. Peace.